What if I told you the man the FBI once called public enemy number one was so slick, so elusive, and so daring that even death itself couldn't convince the public he was truly gone? A man who robbed 24 banks, 4 police stations, and still found time to be the nation's most wanted romantic. He wasn't just a thief. He was a legend. Some say a Robin Hood, others say a killer. But the truth? The truth is more unbelievable than the myth. This is the untold story of John Dillinger, a young man from Indiana who would become the most infamous bank robber in American history. But before the shootouts and the machine guns, before the headlines and the Hollywood films, he was just a boy trying to escape the grip of a hard life, and he would do anything to feel free. John Herbert Dillinger was born on June 22, 1903, in Indianapolis. He was the youngest of 2 children. His mother died just before he turned 4. The tragedy of losing a parent so young left a permanent mark on him. He was set to live with his sister for a while, but that arrangement didn't last. His father, a man known for his strict hand and unpredictable anger, remarried in 1912 and brought young John back home. But the damage had already begun. At school, John's teachers noticed something strange. He was bright, sharp even, but he was also restless, rebellious. He loved baseball, and for a while that gave him purpose. But as the years passed, the pull of the streets became stronger. He started skipping classes, getting into fights, and running with the wrong crowd. By 16, he dropped out entirely. The world was calling him, and not the kind his father wanted. Around that time, America was gearing up for World War I. While many young men were being shipped off to fight, Dillinger found work easily. He hustled first as a messenger boy at the Board of Trade, then at a machine shop. But his father wasn't done with him. In 1921, he moved the family to a quieter town, Mooresville, Indiana, hoping a change of scenery would tame his son. It didn't. Instead, John grew more defiant. After a bad breakup, he decided to run from his legal troubles by enlisting in the Navy. But even that didn't stick. He deserted within days. By 1924, he was back in Mooresville and married to a 16-year-old named Beryl Ethel Hovius. But John Dillinger, even then, wasn't the kind of man who could sit still for love. He wanted more excitement, more danger, more of everything. And danger found him. One drunken night in September 1924, John and a friend and ex-con named Ed Singleton hatched a plan. They knew the local grocer's route home. He always carried the day's earnings. That night, they ambushed him in an alley. Dillinger struck the man with a metal bolt wrapped in cloth. They ran off with $50. It was barely a payday. Adjusted for today, it would be less than $900. But that $50 mistake would cost him 12 years in prison, and so began the transformation of John Dillinger. At 21, he was thrown into Pendleton Reformatory, a place meant to break men, but it didn't break John. It sharpened him. His charisma earned him respect from the other inmates, and his relentless attempts to escape made him a legend behind bars. He tried to break out 4 times within the first year. Every failure only fueled his hunger. That same year, 2 things happened that would change his life forever. His wife filed for divorce, and the prison transferred 2 of his closest friends, men he had begun to see as brothers. Among them were Homer Van Meter, Russell Clark, and a man named Harry Pierpont. They weren't just criminals. They were professionals, bank robbers with blueprints in their minds, and a lifetime of bad ideas in their veins. John wanted in. Eventually, John managed to get transferred to Indiana State Prison under the clever pretense of joining their better baseball team, and it worked. He was reunited with his old friends, and together they began planning a future on the outside. Dillinger's charisma drew in even more seasoned criminals, including the infamous Herman Lamb, a German-American bank robber whose techniques were so precise they were studied by police long after his death. Lamb had a system, a cold, calculated method of casing banks, organizing the getaway, and controlling the crew. He called it the Lamb technique. Dillinger absorbed every word. He wasn't just dreaming of freedom anymore. He was plotting it. And in 1933, that freedom finally came. The country Dillinger walked back into wasn't the one he had left. America was drowning in the Great Depression. Millions were jobless, starving, angry, and the banks, they were the villains, which made Dillinger a dark kind of hero. Especially once the newspapers got hold of his story, Dillinger returned to the outside with a plan and people. He linked up with Pierpont's men and began robbing banks with the precision of a surgeon. He wore disguises, pretended to be federal agents. One witness even claimed he posed as an NRI official doing a statewide survey on banking codes. Before long, he was called the Jackrabbit for the way he'd leap across bank counters yelling, "This is a stick-up." In just a few months, he made off with more than $50,000, almost $1 million in today's money. But John hadn't forgotten his friends in prison. He used some of his earnings to smuggle weapons into Indiana State Prison, marking the boxes with X's so his boys knew where to find them. As they geared up to escape, John took a detour to Ohio to visit a new love interest. It was there that police recognized him from a previous heist and locked him up in Lima, Ohio. It should have ended there. But Dillinger's gang had other plans. 2 weeks later, his crew dressed as state troopers walked into the jail, demanded his release, and shot the sheriff point blank when he resisted. Within minutes, they had him out. Newspapers dubbed them the Dillinger Gang, and the myth only grew louder. He was in love again, this time with Evelyn Billy Frechette. He bought her cars, diamonds, took her dancing. She'd later say, "He treated me like a lady." But make no mistake, John Dillinger wasn't slowing down. Together with his gang, he racked up hundreds of thousands more in robberies, now with his face plastered across every front page in America. To the public, he was a star. The Depression had made people desperate, and John Dillinger was sticking it to the banks, the very institutions they blamed for their misery. He wasn't just a man anymore. He was a symbol. But symbols don't bleed, and the FBI wanted him to bleed. J. Edgar Hoover, then just beginning to shape the agency into what it is today, saw in Dillinger the perfect poster boy for the Bureau's new war on crime. Special Agent Melvin Purvis was assigned to track him down, and it wouldn't be long before blood was spilled. On January 15, 1934, Dillinger and Red Hamilton robbed the East Chicago Bank. This time, things got messy. They used machine guns, took hostages, and when the police showed up, Dillinger shot an officer dead. That killing shook the image people had of him. Was he a killer now? Or just a desperate man trying to stay free? The country debated. Some insisted he had been framed. Others called for his execution. By the end of January, he was captured in Tucson, Arizona. The evidence against him was damning money and his possession had serial numbers matching the East Chicago heist. But even behind bars, Dillinger didn't panic. He was locked up in Crown Point Jail, a fortress they called escape-proof. Dillinger took it as a challenge, and he accepted. 2 months later, he pulled off what would become one of the most legendary prison escapes in U.S. history, without a single shot fired. But how? What he did next will leave you in shock. By March 1934, America had seen its share of outlaws, machine gun-toting desperados, and bootleggers turned icons. But nobody had ever walked out of a maximum security jail with nothing but a carved piece of wood and a plan so outrageous. Even the guards refused to believe it until it was too late. John Dillinger didn't just break out of jail, he humiliated the system, and it made him a national sensation all over again. He was locked away in Lake County Jail in Crown Point, Indiana, a place officials proudly called escape-proof. The guards treated him like a trophy, showing him off to the press like a prized animal in a cage. But while they posed for photos and smoked their cigars, Dillinger was quietly carving. He had somehow obtained a block of wood, possibly from a broom handle. Depending on who you believe, and with patience and polish, he turned it into the perfect imitation of a pistol. He painted it black with shoe polish, then waited. On March 3, 1934, he put his plan in motion. Dillinger and an accomplice lured several staff members into a holding area and pulled the fake gun on them. The guards froze. Some say it was the confidence in Dillinger's voice. Others swear he must have had a real weapon. But by the time they realized it wasn't loaded with bullets, it was too late. He locked them all in a cell, then walked across the street, stole the sheriff's own V8 Ford, and drove off like he owned the world. It was his boldest escape yet, and he didn't fire a single shot. The press went into a frenzy. Americans were obsessed. The man they thought was cornered had just driven through the front gates of a fortress with a smirk and a wooden toy. Headlines screamed across the country, and for the Bureau of Investigation, now embarrassed beyond measure, it was war. Back on the run, Dillinger reunited with his sweetheart Evelyn Billy Frechette. They headed north and hid out in St. Paul, Minnesota, under the names Mr. and Mrs. Hellman. It was a modest life for two people being hunted by federal agents, but it wouldn't last. The feds got a tip. A suspicious couple had moved into the Lincoln Court apartments, and the man matched the description. On March 31st, agents showed up. Frechette answered the door. She saw the badge, slammed it shut. Suddenly, bullets ripped through the hallway. Dillinger was inside machine gun in hand, firing a storm of lead as he and Frechette bolted down the back exit. They escaped, but not unscathed. Dillinger had taken a bullet to the shoulder. Bleeding, limping, he disappeared into the night once more. It was a narrow escape, and his paranoia was growing. He knew he couldn't keep hiding behind a famous face. His image was plastered across newspapers, wanted posters, and every radio bulletin. He needed a new identity, literally. So he decided to erase himself. Through criminal connections, Dillinger found a man who could help. Not just any man, but a shady doctor by the name of Wilhelm Loser, who claimed he could alter Dillinger's appearance and even burn off his fingerprints. Dillinger and his close associate, Homer Van Meter, were led to a house on Chicago's South Side where Dr. Loser operated out of a makeshift surgical room in a friend's apartment. On May 27, 1934, the procedure began. With crude instruments and no proper anesthesia, Loser removed several moles from Dillinger's face, reshaped his nose and chin, and attempted to blur his fingerprints using a brutal chemical solution made from nitric and hydrochloric acid. It was agony. His skin peeled, his fingers burned, but Dillinger endured it. When it was over, he no longer looked like the man on the wanted posters. He took on a new name, Jimmy Lawrence. And for a short while, Jimmy Lawrence vanished into the crowd. But not for long. Dillinger was still chasing scores. He couldn't help it. The thrill, the rush, the money, it called to him. So he gathered what remained of his crew, including Babyface Nelson and Van Meter, and on June 30th, 1934, they stormed Merchants National Bank in South Bend, Indiana. The job went bad fast. A police officer responded before they even exited the building. Van Meter gunned him down. Then Babyface Nelson, wearing a bulletproof vest, was hit by a local man trying to be a hero. It didn't stop him. They grabbed hostages, shot their way out, and vanished again with just under $30,000 in cash. But the body count was rising. This wasn't the clean, clever stick-up from the old days. It was chaos. And for the first time, the public began to shift. Was this still the outlaw hero? Or just a dangerous man on a collision course? Meanwhile, Dillinger had found a new romantic interest, Rita Polly Hamilton, a waitress from Chicago who had no idea who he really was. She believed she was dating a man named Jimmy Lawrence, a quiet guy with money and charm. They spent time together, even befriended a Romanian woman named Anna Sage, an old acquaintance of Polly's from a local brothel. But Anna Sage had secrets of her own. She was facing deportation, and she saw an opportunity. If she could help the FBI catch John Dillinger, maybe they'd let her stay. She contacted federal agents, who in turn connected her with Special Agent Melvin Purvis. She told them everything: where Dillinger lived, what name he was using, even that he loved going to the movies. And then she made the promise that would seal his fate. She would let them know the next time he planned to go out in public. It didn't take long. A few days later, she called Purvis. Dillinger and Polly planned to see a movie that evening, either at the Marlboro Theater or the Biograph. She wasn't sure which, but promised to wear a bright red dress so agents could spot her. The trap was set. On July 22, 1934, just after 8 p.m., Anna Sage walked down Lincoln Avenue in Chicago, flanked by Polly Hamilton and John Dillinger. She wore her red dress, just as she promised. Across the street, Agent Purvis watched from the shadows. The trio entered the Biograph Theater to watch a film called Manhattan Melodrama, an ironic title about gangsters and loyalty. The agents waited outside. They didn't storm the theater. They waited until the lights came back on, and the trio stepped into the humid summer night. Dillinger paused. Something felt wrong. His eyes scanned the street. He tightened his grip on Polly's hand. Then he bolted. Purvis shouted for him to surrender. Dillinger turned down an alley, his last mistake. The alley was closed off. He reached for his pistol. Before he could raise it, agents opened fire. 3 bullets hit him. One tore through his neck, severing his spinal cord. Another exited just below his right eye. John Dillinger collapsed in a heap. He was dead before he hit the ground. The crowd gathered quickly. The street buzzed with whispers and disbelief. Could it really be him? America's most wanted man gunned down in an alley after a movie? Some people dipped their handkerchiefs in the pool of his blood. Others stared in silence. Some cried. Just like that, public enemy number one was no more. The government celebrated. The newspapers ran the photos. J. Edgar Hoover finally had his headline. But not everyone was convinced. Rumors swirled that the man killed outside the biograph wasn't really Dillinger at all, that someone else had taken his place, that the FBI needed a win so badly they'd settled for a body and a story. Conspiracy theories took root, and even now, decades later, some believe he escaped again. The man who defied the system, outwitted the authorities, and robbed the banks that ruined America may have vanished one last time. Because when legends die, they don't just fade. They haunt us. And John Dillinger? He was more than a man. He was a myth. And myths don't bleed. The alley behind the Biograph Theater was soaked in red. Cameras flashed, reporters barked questions. Policemen pushed back crowds. And lying still, surrounded by the chaos he used to command, was a man the nation believed to be John Dillinger, public enemy number one. But almost instantly, something felt off. People whispered it, muttered it, spread it like wildfire. That's not him. The corpse on the sidewalk was too heavy, too tall. The eyes were brown, but Dillinger's were famously blue. And strangest of all, the fingerprints didn't match, not completely. The scars on his fingertips looked fresh, melted, like someone had tried to burn them off. The FBI brushed off the rumors, but the public wasn't so sure. Was it possible that the man who escaped prison with a fake gun, carved from wood, had pulled off the greatest vanishing act of all time? Had John Dillinger faked his own death? The government insisted they got their man. The body was quickly buried in Crown Hill Cemetery under heavy guard. But then came the letters, the sightings, the whispers. From Los Angeles to Brazil, people swore they'd seen him. He was living under a new name, working on a farm, running a bar in California, hiding with mobsters in Mexico. One story even claimed he'd walked into a sheriff's office years later just to smile and leave. And then there were the fingerprints. The FBI tried to explain them away. They said the acid had altered the ridges, made them unreadable. But not everyone bought it. Some experts pointed out that even heavily scarred prints leave traceable patterns. And yet, in this case, the records were conveniently missing, gone, filed incorrectly, or maybe erased. It wasn't long before people started asking the question no one in power wanted to answer. Did John Dillinger beat the system one final time? Let's rewind. Just days before he was supposedly gunned down, Dillinger was living under the alias Jimmy Lawrence with Polly Hamilton. He was careful, paranoid. He knew the walls were closing in. He changed apartments often, slept with a pistol under his pillow, never sat with his back to a window, and he had one last plan, one last job. Somewhere in a dusty vault, there's a police report that was quietly shelved. It mentions a break-in at a small federal storage facility in Illinois just days before Dillinger's death. The contents of the vault? Records, documents, identities, aliases used during the war by undercover operatives. The kind of place where someone like Dillinger could erase himself or become someone else entirely. No money was taken, but a handful of files were reported missing. And just like that, Jimmy Lawrence was born. There's no proof, of course, just gaps, missing reports, sealed files, photos that don't match, and a question mark that never goes away. In the years that followed, Dillinger's myth exploded. Books were written, movies made. Tourists visited the Biograph Theater just to stand on the same blood-stained bricks. But with every new film, every retelling, the story blurred a little more. Was he a gangster? A murderer? Or was he something far more dangerous? A man who made the government look powerless. Even in death, he remained untouchable. Then in 2019, something wild happened. Over 8 decades after his death, the Dillinger family petitioned to have his body exhumed. They wanted a DNA test, not because they needed closure, but because deep down they still weren't sure it was him, and neither was anyone else. The FBI fought it hard. They claimed it would serve no purpose. They said the case was closed. But people asked, if you're so certain that body belongs to Dillinger, why fight so hard to keep it buried? Why silence the only test that could end the debate once and for all? The request was denied. To this day, the grave in Crown Hill remains untouched. But the whispers never stopped, because Dillinger wasn't just a man. He was a question, a riddle wrapped in a submachine gun and a smile. A man who turned law enforcement into a laughingstock, who robbed police stations, walked out of jail with a wooden toy, and convinced the public that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the villain after all. He didn't just rob banks. He robbed the country of certainty. He blurred the line between criminal and legend, outlaw and martyr, fact and fiction. And in the end, he might have robbed death itself. So here's the truth, no matter what the files say or what the FBI wants you to believe. Some men die once. John Dillinger, he died twice. Once in the alley and once in our imagination. But until someone digs up that grave and proves otherwise, he's still out there, somewhere, smiling, watching, waiting for the next heist, and maybe, just maybe, holding a fake pistol carved from wood.